Action Wars. Can't we just all get along? Hello everyone, Bront, CatHerder here. We're having some fun talking Raid Shadow Legends, and thank you Raid for sponsoring this video. We are here to talk about hard faction wars. We are on my main because honestly, on my free-to-play, I have not managed to beat any stage of hard faction wars, and I will admit some of that is simply because I haven't really tried, because in most of my cases, my factions are doing barely well enough to kind of full auto 20 or 21 at a reasonable-ish time, and in some cases they can do it in under a minute, but that doesn't mean they can do hard faction wars, because hard faction wars ramps up the game significantly. So, you know, that has been a bit of a problem for me jumping in there. And that said, that means that for those of you struggling to get into hard faction wars because you're still, struggling to get into the hard dungeons, you're still doing normal or even hard Hydra, you're not quite ready to do like brutal Chimera, you're in the right spot if you can't do hard faction wars. Don't feel too bad about it. Hard faction wars is some of the hardest content that Raid has put out in years, so I know several of you guys have been asking for strategies, or asking for faction by faction breakdowns, and I can certainly dive into some of those later on in some other videos. To be fair, my Faction Wars derping series, where I broke into that in regular Faction Wars, honestly never did super well. It was just one of the things that I really wanted to do as a creator, and so I did it. So those videos are honestly still semi-relevant for hard Faction Wars, because while I talk about regular Faction Wars, I do go over a lot of the champs that could be useful in Faction Wars, and they haven't changed too much in hard faction wars. That said, I want to talk about just a little bit some of the tips and strategies that I have used to just get where I am in hard faction wars, and why I've kind of decided I'm not pushing super hard into finishing hard faction wars. So if we take a look at my account and where I'm at with my account, you can see here I've got several factions where I've got 40 or more stars. In fact, Undead and Barbarians are where I am the furthest. Shadowkin I am fairly good at as well. Dwarf I'm doing pretty good at. Other ones I am struggling at. Ogryn has been my biggest weakness of any kind. In fact, Ogryn, up until getting First Axe Tuskor, I was at 4 or 5 stars. I just couldn't get past the third floor, and I could barely do the second floor, and it was painful. Now with First Axe Tuskor, then I was able to clear all the way up. I believe I'm in stage 13 there. I have not been able to get past stage 14, but I also haven't had a chance to use Diamant yet. So, maybe look forward for a video for Diamant. I've got him fully booked. I have to build him out at some point in time, so maybe I'll see if I can do a video on him, and maybe he'll actually help me in the Ogryn Tribe Faction Wars as well. Unfortunately, that opens in 3 days, so even if I were to film it later today, I can't talk about the faction crypt there, but I can, break down the champion. Maybe he'll be useful there, maybe not. Undead for me has been fairly easy. In fact, you can see here, I'm missing, 5 stars, missing star here, star here, star here, and star here. And you might look and say, well, Bront, why haven't you gone back and done some of those extra stars? Well, I can't actually tell you because I don't see what they are, but some of these things are conditions where it's like put sleep on 15 to 20 times, which means I need to build dazed sets. And sorry, I just don't feel interested in building daze sense on champions. Some of them are probably very big conditional ones of make sure you get certain things done. I know there was one of them to make sure you don't kill anybody with a buff on them that I had to basically hand walk through with my team. Now, why is my undead team so particularly good? Well, because I've got Siphi and double Rhodos, and that kind of takes care of most of it. But Fabian is an all-star in this, and then Vlad has been the final key to giving me turn meter control on the waves, giving me block active skills to block everyone out there, giving me decreased defense to add additional damage. And then Siphi basically means that my Rhodoses are uncontrollable and mostly unstoppable. One of my Rhodoses isn't even booked, but I have a 5-star blessing on both of them, and they absolutely wreck in this content because they basically slowly but surely grow and continue to get stronger until they just absolutely murderize opponents, and it's just absolutely amazing, and I love it. So that is why I've done well on this stage and not done quite as well in other stages. But what has proven to be true in a lot of this is there's a couple of key factors in all of these stages here. First of all, Live Arena has been one of the keys to getting done hard faction wars as much as I have. I maxed all this stuff out because this stuff was super, super cheap. See here, 500 each for me to get 30% here, 8 plus 80, whatever else. This has made building champions for faction wars so much easier, specifically the extra 20 speed, but also extra 20 ignore defense means everyone's doing that much more damage against really high defense champions and of course bosses as well. And the extra crit damage as well is 30% extra damage on top of the fact that we are ignoring some extra defense. And of course we've got the extra survivability from HP and defense and extra damage. This has been huge, and this has let me take builds that are good but not necessarily like the top tier builds on my account, and get very far in faction wars for them. Now, one of the things I could do to get further in faction wars is start moving my gear around more. And honestly, that's something I probably do need to do, but I don't like moving my gear around too much, even though it's free now. I don't like having champions that are ungeared because oftentimes I find that delays things more than having second grade gear on champions. And I have enough really good second grade gear to gear an awful lot of champions at a very high level on this account. But if I consolidated my gear, yeah, I could probably get a little further in faction wars by putting the absolute best gear on a couple of these champions and going nuts. But that doesn't mean I would be able to beat faction wars entirely. And that's a bit of everything that's the problem with hard faction wars. So here in the help stage right here, you can get to this by clicking this little info button right here. Under hard, you can actually see what the 3-star conditions are for every faction. So we were talking about earlier for undead hordes, go to stage 13, place 15 sleep buffs. Like I said, kind of rough. I think 16 is defeat 3 allies using ally attack skills or counterattacks. I don't have a lot of ally attack skills in the undead built. I probably have a catacomb counselor, and I probably would need to actually bring him in, and he probably would do just fine, but I would need to actually build a catacomb counselor for this if I don't have one on the account already, and that's kind of annoying and seems kind of weird for me to build a champion for a single stage of a single thing. Although, again, honestly, I've done that for other content, so I guess that's not that big of a deal. Don't land any weak hits. I am not looking forward to ever dealing with that one. That one just seems like it's such a pain that I am going to ignore it until I am pretty much ready to get Polera, and then I will fight with that one. And I'm not close enough yet, so that doesn't seem like it's worth my time. Kill enemies while they're under fear, true fear. I don't know who does fear in the undead that I have, so that one's going to be problematic because I can't do gear with that one either, unlike for the sleep buff one, where I could do that with gear. So, you know, annoying. And that's really kind of the big problem that we have with these faction wars is some of these things right here are super niche, are super difficult, and are difficult to do when you're also doing super high level content that requires ridiculous stats. And that's really kind of where you're at. We're at a point here where I've got champions that are over 290 speed going into stage 21, and they're not winning the speed race. That's scary. And so that means you want your speed auras, if ever possible, for these champions. It makes a huge difference if you have a speed aura versus not having a speed aura in a faction. It also helps if you have speed boosters in a faction, because speed boosters can then just outspeed and pull everyone else up and help you control the other waves. Having the control helps as well because you need to control the waves, but some waves are beyond control because they've got champions like Jingwang, for example, who will undo all that control and then put block buffs on everybody, and it's or block debuffs, I should say, on everyone, and it's absolutely annoying to get past those Jingwang waves, for example. There are so many ways that this content is just ridiculously hard that it makes it hard to do some of these niche goals. Other things have certainly been a problem for people is, like, for example, in Dark Elves, I am stuck on stage 14 because it is the purple boss. You know, I did not have a problem with the purple boss on this stage because, well, I had multiple Rhodoses, so they were actually able to whittle away at the max HP of this guy and chunk it away easily. Plus, I could drop things like some of the buffs that this guy would use using Fabian, who would strip the buffs, and then I could block my disadvantage buffs that I would get from this purple boss by having Siphi and protection set, and therefore I would have protected block debuffs on my champions. And on top of that, Rotos gets self-cleansed the moment Siphi is on the team anyway. So I didn't have to worry about my two biggest nukers, really ever being crowd controlled by this boss, which meant that I could power through this boss quickly. But I had so many things going for me in this particular faction. Whereas with my Dark Elves, I've tried building Kaden or tried using Rian the Conjurer. I don't have a lot of really good healers. I could certainly try to build my Truath. I believe I've got one, so I could use her as a healer, maybe. Or I could use, I've been using Painkeeper, who actually does some decent healing and other stuff that she does fairly well as well. Maybe I have to give up on some damage, but if I give up on damage, then it struggles to get through the waves, and then it's all manual, and then we're talking 20 minutes for a wave, and that's not fun either. So what I have determined is the best way for me to deal with Faction Wars hard for now is occasionally try to get a little further when I can, check who I'm building champions, where I am pulling champions, and see if I pull champions that can actually help me get some more of these stars completed easily. And until I do that, just occasionally poke here and there at doing later stages, but otherwise run as high a stage as I can at a reasonable level as possible. And quite often, like for example, I will run stage 21 with this team because I want every chance I can get to get this mythical material to craft mythical relics. But if I'm kind of in a hurry, if a stage 20 is full auto, I might full auto stage 20. And if I don't have time for this, then I might even go all the way down to stage 18. Now I can technically get mythical materials here, but it's a little harder. But if I can full auto stage 18 and walk away from it for 2.5 minutes, that is a better use of my time than spending 3 minutes and 30 seconds manualing this stage to get this stage done. And I'm, don't get it done, I have to do it again, or again, 6.5 minutes to do stage 21. So I am trying to get as high as possible in here to get as many of these glyphs as we can, to get as many of these legendary materials as we can, and mythical materials. Obviously, we get all this other epic stuff as well, but I don't care about that stuff at this point. I've got so much of it, I could craft perception for days, and I would run out of the materials to craft in general before I would craft enough of the perception. So it's not a huge problem, but trying to do what I can to do these things as fast as possible. Stage 13 here, full auto, minute. Well, that makes more sense than spending 6 minutes manualing stage 14 to possibly beat it. And stage 14 was really rough, and stage 15 I just can't do here in the High Elves. And that's been always my problem with these things, is there's a big combination of you need really fast champions. You ideally need champions that can provide some level of control, ideally stuns or something like that. So maybe you need to put a bunch of champions in stun sets, for example, might be kind of the meta to deal with for that. Provoke sets could work as well. Sleep sets, I guess, could work, and you'd certainly going to need a couple of them for some of these things, but stun sets probably one of the best ways, or to simply have champions that just do the stun in the first place, so that can be very helpful as well. You probably want a healer reviver because you might eventually take some damage, and if you're not careful, that can be a problem. You probably want to find a way to block debuffs because sometimes these waves can control you and make it very difficult for you to even take a turn in the first place. That is actually part of why some of those stages are just not done, because I can get to the final stage and then I immediately get crowd controlled, CC'd, and just die. So I've been taking what I can get. I've been getting stars where I feel I can. I've not been focusing on the stars, but for the most part, I've been trying to get the best of the relic materials I possibly can. And that, I think, is where most people should be focused on hard faction wars. Part of this is because we have Polera right here. She's kind of disappointing. I don't want to say she's like absolute trash, because honestly, she's a mythic that is not bad. She's got some good uses. She can do some decent things, but she unfortunately falls victim to what actually has fell victim to a lot of the Doom Tower champions, is they are not good enough to be useful for a lot of people by the time you get them. And the people that are able to get Polera have accounts that are so busted anyway and have spent so much effort and time to get her that she is not being helpful. This is not what I had hoped for. This is not another Lydia who continues to prove that she is an MVP legendary in new content as it comes out because her kit is so good. Polera is not, I would have actually been quite happy if they had figured out a way to make Polera Lydia but better. That would have been great. Instead, she's just kinda okay there, and that's fine. She could be very, very helpful to some accounts, but the accounts that she's going to be most helpful for are going to struggle to get her. So I don't think she's worth focusing on getting until you are so close where it becomes I might as well get her because I am literally tripping over myself to not get her if I don't try to clean up these extra 20, 30, 40 stars that I need to clean up. That's kind of where I'm going to start focusing on Polera. Until then, I'm looking to climb as high as possible, and I'm probably going to be waiting until I have most of my factions in the 50 to 58 before I start really diving down and saying, let's actually get Polera. And until I have factions, and while I still have factions like the Ogren tribe, where I am just struggling to get too much further in at 27 stars, then yeah, I don't feel the need to just focus on getting Polera, because this content is painful. It is extremely difficult, very punishing on both your time and your resources. And while I don't think that's the worst thing for the stuff, I think that in some cases it's not fun content. And specifically, I will point to the 0 weak hits one, but I will also point to the sleep one where, and honestly, some of the other control ones, which land 15, 20 of these debuffs, or a couple of them where you have to kill some people without any buffs on them. Some of them are just so extremely difficult to do for certain factions, because not every faction has a buff stripper, for example. Not every faction has somebody that puts stuns or sleeps or provokes up, and they've tried to be good about that, but they haven't been perfect with it. Not every faction has all the pieces to actually do all of this content. One of the things I struggle with the Shadowkin, you see I've got 53 stars here. I have not, actually I think I finally did beat 21 recently, but 21 took, I think it took me like an hour of fighting with it to get it done. The time on it was like 8 to 10 minutes. And the only reason I finished it is because I managed to manage my Nice well enough to make sure that he stayed alive against the boss and finish up against the boss. But since there's no really good healing revivers in Shadowkin, you're just kind of screwed if you can't keep your reviver alive. And so many of the bosses and so many of the waves will just insta-kill folks at random times, so you can't just protect them with Stone Skin to start, because they won't make it past turn 5 when the boss takes their 5th turn, for example, and then nukes somebody and just kills them and happens to kill your reviver. So you know, there's a lot of things to struggle with. So you are looking for speed champions. You're looking for control champions. Those are kind of your highlights there. It's nice to get people that bring decreased defense. But if you can't get that in there, that's fine. Block buffs is one of the most powerful abilities you will find in this Faction Wars, because the ability to prevent a lot of buffs from ever being placed on the enemy can save you all kinds of headaches with unkillables, with block debuffs, with all kinds of fun stuff that you can have. So that is huge. Figuring out ways to lock out champions, so ways to do either reset champion skills or to use things like block active skills can be super huge. Blocking passive skills can be huge, and there's not a lot of champions that let you do that. There are so many things that can really, really help you out. And I haven't even talked about damage yet. A big AoE damage dealer is huge and can make life easier for you. Poisons don't really do the job very well. Burns don't really do the job quite as well as you'd like otherwise, because unless you are igniting them constantly and you've got abilities to increase the damage of poison, for example, with the Arachne Elixir, which to be fair, you can get from this. Poisons are difficult to use, they can be easily cleansed, and they require the enemy to take turns. And these are 3 conditions that are difficult to control and things you don't always want, like the enemy taking turns, in Faction Wars Hard. So again, damage, control, speed, block debuffs, you know, other debuffs that might be helpful for you. There's a lot of things you're looking to bring, and that is why early to mid-game accounts are going to struggle if they can get to Faction Wars Hard. It's really, really hard to even get past stage 1, let alone endgame account that's been playing for years. I'm struggling to get past stage 13 or 14 on a lot of my factions. So hopefully that gives you a couple of tips, at least, for ways that you can improve your hard faction wars. Definitely work on the Great Hall. Definitely consider your team building, looking for people that are going to boost turn meter, give you some cleanses, give you ways to make sure you can shrug off debuffs. You might need to build some people in resistance. You're definitely going to want to build champions that are very fast. You're going to need nukers and people to do damage. And there's a lot of things that you're going to struggle with. And you might even want to keep in mind that it's not like you can build a team to beat every floor. You're going to to have to swap out champions against every floor, because sometimes there's just things that happen on certain floors that you need the right champions to deal with that you wouldn't need on other floors. And that is both from a getting all 3 stars perspective, and that is also from just getting past them perspective, because sometimes you're stuck with, I cannot control this wave, so I need to use a speed booster instead. I don't normally like the speed booster, but in this case the speed booster is who I need to use, and that will change your team. There's all kinds of other things that could possibly change your team as well, so just keep in mind, get your nose down to the grindstone, push as much as you can to get high up in the floors, and getting those forge relics is going to be the greatest reward you're going to get from hard faction wars. And once you get closer to getting Polera, then maybe it's time to start worrying about, okay, I can pick up a few extra stars here and a few extra stars there. And that is where you're probably going to find the best time to really push for the end of faction wars to get yourself Polera, because she's not horrible. Hopefully they might give her a little bit of a buff to make her much better, and if they do, then hey, absolutely push for all those extra stars and go for her as soon as you can. But if you know you can't get her, don't kill yourself looking for unattainable content. Pace yourself, measure your expectations, and do the best you can where you can to get the most benefits you can for your account. So, let me know what you guys think of Hard Faction Wars so far, if you've even delved into it at all, if you think my take on Hard Faction Wars is the right one, or if you think that maybe I should be trying for Polera a little bit more, or there's some other nuances that maybe I missed. Plenty of nuanced opinions out there, plenty of great opinions out there as well. I love to see the discussions we have down in the comments below. You guys are an amazing, amazing community. One of the best communities in Raid Shadow Legends, as well as in all of gaming. And I want to again thank Polarium for sponsoring this video. And until the next one, I am Bront CatHerder.